Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Cecil Staton, a gentleman of substantial repute and abilities who's served his country in the political sphere and also has functioned with great repute as a university professor. Well, welcome, Cecil.
Thank you.
And I know you've observed the world carefully in many ways, and you also come from a religious background, so you can hope that appears in the world. And many subjects present themselves, and one can ask the question about a traditional communist viewpoint, and which I guess you could say used to be embodied by Russia, the Russian Federation. But I don't think we can exactly call that a communist country. And in the past, the Chinese might be considered a communist country, but in a way, there's sort of a mutation there of the traditional Marxian system. So we have these changing political arrangements that are there that are not what we would necessarily think as communists, but they've got their propensity to violently dominate people. And in our own hemisphere, an example might be Cuba and Venezuela, and along with those Latin countries, countries that have tilted in that direction and are now swinging back. So, for instance, Argentina and Chile were going pretty heavily in that direction, and they've swung back. And Brazil, at least for a while, was, you might call it a capitalist country. It still is, but Lula is back, rather like Trump. Lula was put in prison by the conservatives and then won the election, and then he promptly put the conservative in prison. So quid pro quo.
Funny how that works.
It is. It is. I don't know how President Trump respond to his attacks against him, but presumably with some vigor. Well, so we have those countries there, and they really run the place as a sort of terrorist way. The justice system, certainly, if you're against their system, they'll do something bad to you pretty quickly. Everyone seems to have left both countries. And maybe in a way the government likes that. Well, we got all the people that would resist us out of here. About a quarter of Cuba's population has left in the last 4 years, 1/4. So the place is being devastated. These countries are devastated, and their system doesn't seem to work well at all. Yet, in a leftist American viewpoint, that would be an ideal way to go. I mean, I'll just start off by saying that. Is there any lessons that we can learn from the fate of Venezuela and Cuba? And on the left in our country, is there any lessons to be extracted?
Well, I think one of the worst things that can happen within any country is for people who are not educated about what happens in the rest of the world to think that they can bring an idea that may sound great to them ideologically and try to redo it here and hope for a different kind of result or a different kind of outcome. I think it's going to be interesting to watch and see what happens in New York along those lines with the new mayor who is now in office. But, I think it's an interesting time for foreign policy for the United States with what's just happened in Venezuela. Now, there's a lot going on there, a lot to unpack, but I want to say one thing that I find refreshing. Maybe that's too positive of a word, but it's the fact that Trump has been relatively honest about what's going on. The United States, for decades and decades and decades, has had its fingers in geopolitics around the world through the CIA and through other organizations, non-governmental organizations, and has had tremendous influence, overthrowing governments, getting rid of people that were not liked by the American government in power at the time. A lot of this doesn't get front page news or attention in our media, but this has been something the United States has been doing for all of our lifetimes at least, and probably longer. But Trump all of a sudden goes down, and it's not the beginning, hopefully, of a forever war. It's not an Iraq. It's not an Afghanistan. We hope it's not a Libya. But he moves in, and in a very interesting fashion, with apparently a lot of new technology that we have at the disposal of our fighters and military, he goes in and successfully removes this individual who's under indictment in the United States and who's believed to have committed any number of atrocities and things against our country, as well as his own people and others. So it's a new kind of thing. I think it's interesting to me just to think about the difference in the foreign policy approach, and then Trump come right out and admit what it's about at the end of the day: oil.
For his reasons, that's his reason. Maybe it's more complicated. But
well, of course it's more complicated, but I think he's basically going in and saying, there's a reason why we did this. And then you have someone like Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, who's from Florida, is a part of the Cuban diaspora in the state of Florida. And there's a huge Venezuelan diaspora in the state of Florida. Right. He is someone who's had an interest in this region for most of his career and probably life. And there is a hope that because of Venezuela's influence on the Cuban economy, such as it is, that this may very well be the final straw that brings about a collapse in Cuba and ultimately a change in government, if not a regime change there. So it's a sort of a different kind of thing. I'm not a huge fan of the neocon perspective on militarily changing world affairs. I've never been a huge fan of this. I don't like a lot of what the Bushes did. I don't think at the end of the day that served a lot of good purpose for us in those countries, particularly when you see what's going on in some of them now that we're not as much involved as we were. It's a very detrimental kind of thing. But I think in Latin America and in Central and South America, we're in an area where it's different. I think the people of Venezuela apparently are very pleased that this individual is no longer their leader. I think we have a lot more in common with them than we do maybe some countries in the Middle East, Islamic countries.
Right. Yeah.
We have more in common with them as a people. I don't think there's going to be a need to go into Venezuela and conduct a ground war and try to have this massive change that we've attempted, at least in other countries. So it's a different kind of thing. And I think economics do play a role. I think there could be some other ulterior motives for Trump. There's some speculation about Maduro's involvement in election shenanigans and this kind of thing. It'll be interesting to see if any of that comes out in the coming months. But it's a different day, and if at the end of the day Cuba were to finally reach a point where its citizens could find some freedom and economic hope, I think that would be a good thing, and even more so if it can be done without bloodshed.
Well, just so. The complexities of world affairs are what they are. So one, to me, interesting sort of conduit of interest, or a Machiavellian kind of way, we're going to just forget democracy, forget this, forget that. We're going to take your oil and we'll give you a Palm Beach mansion or whatever we're going to do for you. We'll do something nice for whatever, and we'll do a deal. And the people that are, rioting in the streets or whatever will shoot their leaders and we'll placate everyone else with some extra candy bars. So, and in other words, the idea of moral viewpoints, democracy, Thomas Jefferson, whatever, Abraham Lincoln, whatever figures we can put there, truth, justice, something that's compatible with religion, that kind of viewpoint, I think is certainly part of our national DNA. But in the world affairs, it seems to be shaping up. The idea is, well, you're hardly going to expect us to behave like that. The world's what it is. Power makes right. We're going to like blow you up, and we want your oil. We want it, and we're going to take it, and we'll give you some money, and you better accept that, or we'll do something worse to you. And that's the way we'll comport ourselves. And indeed, I think. When in the 20th century these great geopolitical collisions took place, I think that was fairly accepted, that behavior. And going back to which I think people forget this, in Latin America, the 1940, 1939, the Nazis were coming in there, and there was a large German immigrant community. So the idea is the Nazis are going to come south of us. And so what's the U.S. going to do about it? Well, we're going to make sure they don't take over these countries, and we'll do deals with dictators. We'll do whatever, and if we don't take your oil, we'll take your bananas. We'll do whatever deal, whatever's good for us, we'll do. So as you're so powerless, we'll just make sure we'll do a deal with you, but it won't be truth, justice, and Abraham Lincoln. It'll be we're going to pay your guys off. We need an Air Force base there. Well, we'll do one, and your country is quite corrupt, of course, and we'll make sure people are paid off. We'll do this, we'll do that, with the idea that we're putting together hegemony in the hemisphere, which is seemingly what President Trump is interested in, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe we've all been interested in it. But who's getting the second fiddle in this might be the citizen of some of these outlying countries, particularly the ones that are in benighted political and economic situation. You don't have enough to eat, whatever, or not a lot. Life's pretty bad. In your world, the big dogs just dominate things. That's the way your custom is, or your country works. So in that arrangement, we have to wonder, are we going to be sullied somewhat by power manipulation? Mm-hmm. If you manipulate power, doesn't that almost impossible, the manipulation of power, to act immorally? Almost impossible. And so how do we come to understand that if it's necessary for the American identity to say, well, we're the moral country, the light on the hill, the lighthouse for the world. This is the way we're fine, Christian country, and if somebody is hungry, we'll feed them. If somebody needs a place to stay, they can come into our country. And all of those ideals are getting particular blowback. And I think the idea that, for instance, immigration, that's a pretty big story, isn't it? We have, pick your number, 20 million illegal immigrants. The Democratic Party opened the gates for that. All these people are here, and most of them have found employment, I would say, and there's exploitation going on. We can see it right here in Georgia, Middle Georgia, in Macon. Illegal immigrants come in, and then people are hired. They're hired to do whatever, and they're happy for the job. The money is sent back to their native country, causing, in my opinion, an unappreciated economic drain in our country. So we don't normally, when money circulates, it has an extra power, and if the money doesn't circulate, then it drops the nation's GNP. Well, so we have all those issues out there. I threw a few out there. Do you have any thoughts on any of those things?
It's obviously very complicated. I don't think the United States has a particularly great track record with respect to our foreign policy and our influence. I mean, I think it doesn't get talked about as much in our media, in our national discourse. I think most people live their lives in our country very much unaware of the influence that our government seeks to have in other countries around the world. And I'm talking about around the world, or the influence we've had in countries. Again, today maybe it's a little easier to know, maybe harder for the government to hide some of its operations, some of its maneuverings, and we've just seen maybe an example of that in what's happened in Venezuela. But it is very complicated, and I do think, to get to the last issue you mentioned, immigration, it's very, very difficult. Our approach in recent years, decades, to immigration is very different than most countries in this world, including, until very recently, most European countries. There are many countries in the world where people come in and live and move about, but it's very unusual for a country to say, come on in and we're going to provide you with an education free of charge. We're going to provide you with housing free of charge. We're going to give you meals free of charge.
Don't forget health care. Don't forget health care.
No, can't forget health care. We're going to give you health care free of charge. And
because you've suffered.
Yes.
We feel your pain.
Maybe because you will be a voter for my party.
Well, that's right. So a question that might be asked is that we're sort of trying to talk about the conflict between power and morality. What if we want to throw that out there? How we parse our way through that? But the people that are here, they're being treated in a pretty nice way, and our system doesn't work very well. And one thing that I think is not talked about enough or known about enough are the people that are the enablers of these 20 million people.
Yes.
The enablers are American citizens that need someone to cut their grass. They need someone to pick their crops, or sweep the floor, or do whatever, and they want them at a very inexpensive price.
Yes.
So and if those jobs were not there, you could say, well, that's a problem. People, I need somebody to cut my grass. Well, too bad. You have to find another way. It would be to make the people that are hire an illegal immigrant, make them responsible for the validity of their driver's license. So you could say, if you hire a person, it's your responsibility to make sure they're an American citizen. And when they try and lie to you and you accept their lies, then you could go to prison. And that would be where, in my opinion, and this is at least some observers' opinion, the whole situation could be pretty rectified, rather than going out and trying to, arrest people and toss them out or whatever, and all the unpleasantness that happens there. If you just said, well, we're going to go after American citizens that hire someone, and we'll say, well, if you present a false identification, you're going to get in trouble too, but also the person that hires you. And that would really have, in my opinion, a tremendous impact. And it interests me that no one is pursuing this ideal. Yeah. Because you could say, well, the preponderant people that are against illegal immigrants would be in the Republican Party, and the Democrats would be, I don't know, whatever. I want those voters there. But there's no harm, no nip that happens for the people that hire these people, and that's so common, isn't it?
Yes.
People. How do you get these workers? Well, they go to California. They get an illegal driver's license. They present the driver's license to me. I have a driver's license. Is that good enough? Well, sure. It's a valid California license. I guess you're a citizen and you can go to work for me. And well, how did you? And if the immigration authorities appeared, they wouldn't bother you, would they? They'd say, well, I've got the driver's license, and I've been getting this very inexpensive service that's economically quite good for me to do this. Pay the guy off the books, do whatever. And particularly what I've seen, Cecil, I'll talk about it, is I've seen a number of illegal immigrants that have been working as roofers in Macon, Georgia, that fall off the roof and are paralyzed, a number of them. And then they're just thrown, I say literally, in the garbage can. Nobody looks after them. They're paralyzed. They're here illegally. They're in a terrible situation. And the people that put them up on the roof assume no responsibility, generally no responsibility for their welfare. And that's some of what's going on here. And I don't think that's pointed up enough. They just see all these, let's see, Somalians, I get them right, I don't know, Somaliland, Somali, all those people, they're stealing money or whatever. They're doing it with the connivance of people that make use of their employment or apparatus.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Well, I think immigration policy in the United States is just ridiculous. I mean, it is insane, actually, that neither party or both parties have not been willing to come together to attempt to fix this. And this has been going on for years and years, election after election after election. And I think the reason for it is both parties have figured out how, in their minds, to use immigration and the current immigration system in our country for their own political benefit, one side or the other. And we're polarized, and so their political consultants know what they're doing. They've got their messaging, and it serves their interests. But the reality is we need a sensible, common sense approach to immigration. We need an immigration policy that will allow us to get the labor that we actually need in this country, and we do need it in certain areas. But it has to be done in a legal and appropriate way, and no one seems to be willing to address this. I see no solutions coming from either of the political parties, or frankly from even the White House. And so we're in this mess where we have ICE going around the country and dealing with the people that they arrest. Now, to their credit, I do think a lot of what they've done initially is to try to round up the bad dudes, the criminals, the criminal element within the immigration community, and they've gone in and attempted to do that. If you look at the deportations under Trump thus far, 1 year in, they are exceedingly less than immigrations that took place under even Obama or Clinton, or even to some extent Biden. So Trump has had, in many respects, his hands tied, in some cases by the courts, in some cases by just the slow-moving nature of all of these things, trying to put together their plans and implementing them around the country. The numbers are not particularly astonishing in terms of the deportations to this point. But no, in spite of all that, no one's bringing to the table, not on the Democrat side, not on the Republican side, a common sense immigration policy that this country needs and can live with and can get this off of where it is currently, which is just a political hot potato that both parties use to their advantage. So that's what's frustrating to me. We need a great immigration policy. We do need immigrants. We need immigrant labor. But I do think it's fair for the country to have a policy that does that in an orderly and a legal process, and it also brings in the labor that we need, as opposed to this wide open, throw open the doors, anybody come in, there's no vetting, we don't know who's here, and then we see all of these kinds of crazy things like what's happening in Minnesota take place that is shocking, I think, to most Americans.
Now, the country has sought its national identity since its founding. What are we? Who are we? What is our purpose? It's a pretty unusual situation. There are people from everywhere, at least initially from Western Europe, pretty much, and they were creating their ethos as to what are we going to be? What do we think? We're against kings. We're going to have our own country. We're going to show you what we can do. We're going to tame North America. We'll fight bad people wherever they are. We'll be pretty much a Christian nation. You could at least, or that would be the ideal. And then from that sort of Andy of Mayberry ideal, so the country is going through substantial changes, and it's making it harder for it to function, I think. And many people would say, well, I'm all in favor of diversity. And there's so many good things that happen with diversity. You get great people here, you get whatever, really the pick of the litter in the world want to come here. And when they come here, they make these tremendous contributions. And many people are very motivated, moral, wonderful people. Lots of stories about that. But how do you get everyone to live together and to share common ideals? How do you make that ideal work? And so is Robert E. Lee a bad person or whatever, or George Washington as far as that matter goes? And what about all of the wickedness of the country? And it certainly has behaved at times as quite wicked. And so, and many people that are, not everyone, but many people that are new on the street accept those viewpoints, particularly if they've been injured in some way by America in the past. And they may say, well, it's good now, but it certainly has done all kinds of bad things. And the inability to create, that diminishes the ability to create a national identity.
Yes.
And if we don't have a national identity, I think there's a certain sourness that occurs, a certain disillusionment, a certain suppressed anger that's in the DNA of the country these days. And in a way, it's understandable, I think, that a person like President Trump would be attractive for many areas of the population. But in a way, his viewpoints are angry. They're angry viewpoints, and the good guys, the bad guys, and do you really deserve to be here? And this quid pro quo that goes back and forth is really quite destructive. And I'm not sure how that could be handled. And it's understandable, I think, why President Trump would act as he does, and how he would have a legion of supporters that would back him. I think it's understandable. On the other hand, how are we going to make things work in the future? And is the appropriate antidote to President Trump to just put Democrats, far leftist Democrats in office, as they're likely to do, I think. Is that the way to make it work? So we have one side gives one side a nip, the other side gives them a nip. And people have discussed, I think, just hypothetically, well, we're going to have civil war, we're going to fight each other. But that's once again, not uncommon. It happens a lot. And avoiding that should be a national ambition. We should not even consider fighting each other. People cannot even understand how horrible that would be.
Yeah.
It would be quite terrible.
Well, I think there is probably incentive within the political system in our country for this polarization to exist. I do think there's some who probably have no intentions of seeking common ground or finding a solution to the problem because they think their interests are served by the polarization that exists on this issue. I find that alarming and disappointing, and I do not think it serves the national interest. There's an old word. It used to be, I think, a very acceptable and appropriate word in certain contexts. Today, I think it's probably for many a bad word, but it's the word assimilation. I think
Yes.
One of the things we used to expect with immigrants coming to our country is that there would be a certain degree of assimilation into American culture, American values, certainly the English language. I don't think that necessarily means that everyone has to become a Christian. I don't think it means that everyone has to ascribe to every aspect, perhaps, of our common culture. But I do think we are unfortunately in a situation where in some communities there are large numbers of people who simply show no desire, no willingness, no attempts at all to assimilate to any part of the American identity, the American experience. And I think there's been a reaction to that, an overreaction, particularly when it has overflowed into economics. I mean, we have a lot of people in our country today, Americans whose families have been here for generations and generations, who are having deep economic issues. Maybe they are having problems accessing the healthcare system in our country. Maybe they don't have the resources to make sure their children can get a safe, a good education. And then they see these groups coming into our country and being put up in hotels and given cell phones, and their children coming into the schools, and their all of the kinds of things. I just think there's a natural aversion to that on the part of many, many Americans. And as you say, that probably is why President Trump has at least a lot of those individuals as a part of his constituencies and his coalition that brought him into office. But I go back to what I said earlier. It's to me unforgivable that Congress, together with the administration, has not even put forward, no attempt that I'm aware of, to put forward a common sense immigration policy that would begin to address a lot of these issues. And the only thing I can come up with is that it goes back to what I said. It doesn't serve the interests of the two political groups, or those who are behind the scenes, perhaps do very well off of the current polarization that we have on this issue in our country. But I think most Americans would probably welcome someone to come forward with a common sense immigration plan. But we have seen it go so far and swing so far, I would say, particularly during the Biden administration, to this open border, people flooding across the river into Texas, people coming from Canada, plane loads of people being brought in the secrecy of night, putting them up in 4-star hotels in New York, shipping them all over the country to communities that might not even know that this is actually happening until there are literally hordes of people showing up on their doorsteps. And, all of this done in 4 short years to the tune of apparently tens of millions of people. Well, 10 or 20 million.
Well, alas, Cecil, we're out of time, but those are comments that I think resonate, and we look forward to having you back again for some more germane viewpoints. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.